In his final hours at the Justice Department, former Attorney General Jeff Sessions signed a memorandum about consent decrees that could change federal oversight of local police departments. Now, first of all, a consent decree is simply a binding court order that's reached. Two parties sign on to it. It's nothing that complicated. But for the past 20 years or so, and especially during the Obama administration, the Justice Department had used consent decrees to address systemic police problems, mostly civil rights violations and unconstitutional practices. But when the Trump administration began, then Attorney General Sessions ordered a review of all the consent decrees that the DOJ had entered into with law enforcement around the country. And as Sessions packed up his office, he signed a memorandum adding 3 new requirements to any future consent decrees. Now, first, a senior political appointee in the Justice Department must now sign off on any agreements rather than the career lawyers who typically work on the process. Second, justification for a consent decree requires more than just unconstitutional behavior and requires other remedies be attempted and fail first. It notes that even one or more pieces of evidence existing doesn't guarantee that a consent decree will be granted. And the decrees must have sunset dates, timelines for government monitoring to end. Before the memo, consent decrees continued. They had quarterly reports that documented their progress. Now, this is an interesting topic. Joining us now is former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman.
I'm going to go first.
Go ahead.
Harry, I could have sworn this administration was all about less regulation. What is this? Because it sounds like it's more red tape.
Well, the consent decrees are more red tape. No, I think Sessions' order is about having less, I don't know if I'd call it red tape, but less oversight. So the way these work is the Civil Rights Division will find abusive practices and come to town and basically present a thick consent decree and say, sign here. And, you know, the consent decrees have a lot of good ideas in them if you have infinite resources, but the beef of the local officials is they're locked into these in perpetuity. A federal district court judge becomes the de facto, mayor and chief of police, and they're really expensive. When I became U.S. Attorney in Pittsburgh, which had the first decree, in my first meeting with the mayor, very progressive guy, would be for this generally, but after some pleasantries about the Pirates and Steelers, he just went into a tirade about this stuff because his idea was, look, this is keeping us from being able to make the choices about more reform in the police department or school lunches or bike lanes or fixing potholes.
But the reality is in a lot of these places, these decrees were things that the local police departments weren't doing that people complained about, and the priority wasn't put toward fixing the policing. So what's the middle ground? What's the best option? Because a lot of these police departments were not solving their problems until the feds got involved.
That's right, 100% right, abusive, and you needed the feds and to actually fix these. I think there's one idea in here. It is controversial, as you say, Ali, but one idea that makes some sense is the sunset provision. That's the real beef of the officials. Look, let us have this oversight, but for 2 years, 3 years, not 40 years or 10 or 12. Right. And see if we can do better. I think that's probably a decent idea, though it's a tough, sometimes it will mean at the end of the day they still get away with it. You certainly want to be sure there's no constitutional violations, right, but these often go farther.
So just to illustrate this for our viewers who are not, a lot of people live in cities where there have been consent decrees, so they know what they're talking about. Right. There are some obscure things that lead to them sometimes. What has happened in the last decade or so has often been around police shootings or people who claim that they were shot. And of course, until everybody had dash cams and body cams, people weren't taken seriously. And then they found out, well, you know what? Sometimes these things happen. What are consent decrees mostly for? What's the constitutional violation or the civil rights violation that normally gets the feds involved with the local police department?
So the trigger is a so-called pattern and practice. It's just as you say, Ali, but maybe times 5 or 10. A lot of stories of violations. But there's, I wouldn't say a disconnect, but certainly quite a lot that then comes into the consent decree. A lot about training, a lot about cameras, as you say, supervision, oversight. So prophylactic measures to keep this from happening again. So there's the initial violation that triggers things, and then a real kind of rich body of almost regulations to put into place. And the beef of local officials sometimes is that's been not overkill.
Right.
You know, we'd like to do it if we could, but there's a lot of things we'd like to do.
All right. So for the average person at home, or me who's totally overwhelmed by everything you've just said, a memo is just
Which
a
is
note.
not a criticism of you.
No,
Eric.
no, not at all. It's a knock on myself. A memo is just a note.
All right.
What is the gravity of an attorney general signing a memo? Can't the Department of Justice lawyers disregard it?
Certainly not. I mean, there's all kinds of memos in sentencing or how you treat criminal defendants. Right now, that's the law of the department. So a new attorney general can supersede it. But for now, it does change the sort of business model of the civil rights section that deals with these things. You'll have to send them up for signature, have termination dates, have tried other things first. This is now the law of the Justice Department until it's changed. So
In
no,
other
it's
words,
not. It's not precatory. This is the
ain't
deal.
your mama's memo.
Yeah, this is a real thing.
This ain't your mama's memo. Right.
Thanks, Harry. You made a complicated thing a lot clearer to us, as always. Thank you. Harry
appreciate
Litman is a former
Thanks,
Deputy
Alex.
Assistant
Thanks.
Attorney General. Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.